Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to this amazing session that we have on the future of employee experience. A lot of you who have been waiting patiently for this session. A lot of us who sent out saying we've been doing a lot of customer engagement and we've been using a lot of data around customer experiences and engagement. How does the same concept apply at an employee experience? There have been a lot of people who have registered for this workshop, for this 1 hour roundtable, who also been providing insights on the social media and other places, saying this is what our organization is already doing about it. Oh, these are the technologies available that are happening around it. Some people who are looking at from a pure lens of the last 2 years and how technology and how the pandemic forced us to take up those technologies. Others who were worried more about how the future looks about it, elements of how millennials would fit into it, how generation I would fit into it, and what does it mean for the future of work. So I welcome all of you, and I promise that the panel would today is going to answer a lot of those questions. If they don't, you have the choice of putting the questions on the chat, and I'm make sure that they don't leave us before they answer all our questions. As your host for the day, I'll ensure that all of the questions are put to them. Welcome again. My name is Ashish Kaul, as I represent SHRM India. I work along the advisory and knowledge services at SHRM, and I'm going to be the host for the day today. As we get into this amazing topic, which is part of a long-term association, thankfully, which is sponsored by a Tydy, and thanks a ton, for them to helping us to bring relevant topics to all of you. This is the second episode that we are having, and we're going to talk about how data can help you in the employee experience game. To discuss this, the panel, all great people and people coming from organizations where they would have had an experience. So we have practitioners and we also have an SME from the market. So in no particular order, I welcome Mr. Ramasubramanian, who is a director, regional services at Mondelez International. We all call him fondly, call just with the Ram. So I welcome you, Ram. Thanks a ton for taking out time and joining us. Along with Ram, we also have a Sana. Sana is Vice President HR at Urban Company. Thanks a ton for joining us in. She's spoken at SHRM platforms before. One of those fantastic people to have insights. Obviously, their organization is known for the customer insights, because my app keeps on telling me what does my house need, when do I need a haircut. So obviously, I'm sure they would have insights around what can be done around employee experience as well. Then we also have the CEO and co-founder from Tydy, uh, Kiran. Kiran has been with the organization for many years, been instrumental in bringing up this organization. I remember I had seen Tydy a couple of years back when it was doing the employee induction, and now they do the employee experience piece of it, which a lot of my clients and a lot of the people in the market are talking about. We're going to refer to him mostly around what has been his experience, because just sheer fact that he works across so many clients. So what does he feel about it? So as people are joining in, I'm just reminding all of you again, thanks a ton for joining in. Please keep on logging in. I can see a lot of people logging in. If you're facing any technical problems, just let us know. I am available and the whole SHRM team is available on the chat. You will be able to participate in a couple of polls. Feel free to give us your opinion. At the same time, you also have the option of chatting with our speakers, so please feel free to put those questions on the chat, and we'll ensure that over a period of time we take questions from available, given that we have a time limitation. So with that, to start the session on this amazing topic, so maybe we should come up with the first poll. So can we please have the first poll on the screen? So I'm sure all of you can see the poll. Has your organization been able to use data to deliver a consistent and personalized employee experience? So request everybody who's logged in to please take the poll. Okay, I already have a couple of people who started. I have people, getting into all three categories with no and sort of leading till now. Okay, almost half of the population, getting into. We'll keep the poll open for a couple of more minutes and then see how it goes. Okay. Wow, it's very interesting to see the people, taking this. Great. I request all of the others, please, last few minutes, when we take up this. Okay, I have almost 50% of the audience was taken up the poll. Getting a good mix of people saying yes, no, sort of. This is going to be interesting. Maybe last 10 seconds, are we going to keep this open? I request everybody who's logged in, please go ahead and take the poll that you see on your screens. Okay, last maybe 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm just going to end the poll in here and bring in the results on the screen. So that's where you see the screen. Almost more than half of more than like almost 80% of the of the people who logged in saying no, 40% saying no, 40% saying sort of, which is almost a no again. So almost 80% of the people logged in are saying that no, we do not see any data to deliver consistent and personalized employee experience. So we've not been able to kind of get that in. Let me turn over to Kiran. Kiran, what does this tell you? Of course, lots of scope for Tydy to use, the technology and tools. But what does this tell you overall? When you see almost, and this is the story across, believe me, across this poll. When I talk to people, when we go out, people tell us that they've not really had the chance to get data together to use, for employee experience.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ashish. So I think first of all, this is a fairly nascent or early days from an HR tech perspective as far as data is concerned. I think a lot of the focus during the initial years of HR tech has been about improving existing processes, automating existing existing processes and existing employee experiences. But we're starting to see companies now becoming more mature from the perspective of wanting to use data to really start delivering an experience which is 10x of what they used to, right? And I think this is a good time for me to just set some context on the on this webinar as well. The basic introduction that I would like to give is that all of us as consumers, we all use every single consumer app that we use, whether it be food delivery to, in-home services to package delivery, whatever it may be, e-commerce. I think we're all very used to the fact that we live in a data-driven world. And we're fairly comfortable with it. I mean, yes, there is a little bit of a question at times, how are companies using data and those kind of things. But I think more often than not, we're all very comfortable with the fact that our e-commerce company will tell us what we need to buy just because we bought something else. Our lunches and dinners and all of that is also recommended to us, which is great. I have less to kind of think about, and it really helps me enjoy the service a lot better, right? So we live in that data-driven world as consumers, but then when we come into the workplace, it's a very different experience. It's a very different experience, which in my terms, at least, is very broken. The employee experience is very broken from that perspective. It's not the lack of technology. It's not the lack of solutions. I think it's fundamentally driven by the fact that it's employee experience is seen as an HR problem, but it's not really an HR problem. It is something that companies have to look at holistically from an experience perspective, right? And the employees are probably one of your most important stakeholders within the organization. And I think I can speak to most people when I say that when I come into the workplace, I have new expectations. I want personalization. I don't want cookie cutter processes. I don't want the same process that 5,000 other people are going to get. I want to be able to build relationships. It's not just a transaction anymore. It's not just about a job, right? And I want to basically have the company deliver a service which gives me consistent growth. And it's not just about designations as well anymore. I mean, if you look at your millennials and Gen Zs and all of them coming into the workplace, it's no longer about, just about what is your designation, but it is also how can I grow, and how does the company give me the tools and enable me to grow into that career that I want over a period of time. So I think we need to kind of move away from that whole thought process and move into a completely different experience and data-driven employee experience. And from that perspective, I think I have the honor of welcoming both Sana and Ram as well into this panel, because I think I'm being very honest in saying that they come from consumer first companies. There is a huge amount of CX, consumer experience, that we can kind of learn from. And I think Urban Clap and Swiggy are two of the pioneers in terms of, using and delivering a great service for their customers. So I think, having said that, Sana, from your perspective, what would you think is EX in the current economy that we live in the current workplace that we live in?
Sure. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for having me here. I think everything that you said was very pertinent. I could probably copy paste that for this answer as well. And you'll probably get to see a lot of repetition. But I think if I have to think of it from my own personal lens, and if I'm not really looking at it from a here's the definition of employee experience, I think it's simply about how does a particular moment make me feel. That's my experience of it. And that experience is very different. We might be looking at the same touch point or same same moment, but that how it makes Sana feels versus how it makes Kiran feels, versus how it makes Ram feel, is going to be very unique, and it comes from your own individual vantage points. And I think that's what the world of customizations that we see across all types of products. If it's the kind of the Mac skin book that you want to get, or the kind of iPhone cover that you want to get, right? Everything has seen customizations, and I think employee experiences will also, or is already seeing its own sense of customization, what you called moving away from cookie cutter processes. So I think at the end of it, employee experience for me is about how does a particular moment feel. It'll be important and pertinent for essentially HR has to do what business does, right? Like if you're talking about customer experience, we are looking at every touch point of a customer from Swiggy's lens or from Urban Company's lens. Every time you open the door and there's an Urban Company professional standing out there, that's one touch point. So how does that make you feel? Do I feel like there's a great professional standing in front of me? And that differs across different segments, different categories, different. I think that has to be replicated with HR as well. That every time an employee comes and walks through your doors, they're meeting a Sana versus they're meeting a Kiran versus meeting a Ram. How do we want them to feel, and what do we want them to take away from those moments? That kind of boils down for me as employee experience.
Got it. No, absolutely makes sense. Thank you for that. And I think moments really matter, right? From an employee experience perspective, and really addressing each one of those moments in the best way possible. So Ram is director for Swiggy. You work with a lot of technologists, a lot of engineers. I'm sure they are used to delivering a service to a lot of customers. In your perspective, what is employee experience? I mean, having worked with so many engineering teams and engineering professionals, I'm sure there's a lot of conversation around data as well.
Hey, before addressing the question, thank you so much for having me here. A great afternoon, and thank you. Yes, of course, Kiran, I think I think we call ourselves to be the kings of convenience. That's a vision for the organization, and in fact, the statement actually reads that hey, we want to provide unparalleled convenience to our consumers. Now, that's what we actually strive to provide to the consumers, right? And when you actually come back, we have millennials, we have people who actually are breathing day in and day out to actually strive to actually provide that experience. And when they actually come back inside the organization, there needs to be a continuity to what we actually promise externally and the experience that people actually have internally. To coming back, what's an employee experience in my view is it's an emotional state. It's simply put, we measure experience in the form of an emotion, and these emotions are actually driven by what I experience, and a lot many times by what I feel, hear, and see. What others say also actually matters a lot more in this entire context. So employee experience, as much as it is actually about the touch points, it actually is also about the collective experience and the individual experience as well. A lot many times when we speak about employee experience, we tend to look at the employee life cycle very similar to the consumer life cycle. What matters to me as an employee, my onboarding, my learning, my experiences, etc., etc. But I feel, given that a lot of work in the organizations happen as a collective, because if you actually compare consumer experience with, let's say, an employee experience, consumer experience is actually my experience. I ordered the food and I got it and I actually walked away with it. I had a great experience. But what happens is, in the context of organizations, people work in teams, people work in departments, and as much as my experience matters, my experience has been fantabulous. Hey, you know what? My friend and my peer actually said that, hey, you know what? He felt something was actually broken, and that does influence, a lot of how I perceive the organization as much, right? So the complexity actually comes in because of the way in which we are organized, the way in which we actually work. So for me, employee experience is actually about a lot of these moments that actually matter. These moments are more personal to me. At the same time, there's also a collective component to it. So that's largely the way in which I actually look at this when I just compare both consumer life cycle and the employee life cycle point of view. At the end of the day, it's an emotion. We measure emotions, typically NPS metrics. That's what we actually look at. But what really matters is, hey, how are you actually looking at peak moments, and actually how are you looking at minimizing pits, or probably what we call as moments that actually really generate those detractors, and actually how much ever you can actually anchor on these three, right? The consistency, predictability, and actually driving these peak moments. That's pretty much what is going to drive the emotional state. So that's the definition that I have. I think we look at it as two dimensions. One is how an individual experiences. The other one is how the collective experiences.
Got it. Now that makes a lot of sense, and thank you for that. I think a couple of things that I'll pick up on and maybe ask you a follow-up question on is that I think you mentioned this, Sana also mentioned this. It's about the emotions. It's about the moment. It's also about that entire, network effect. Like you said, peers, what do they think about it? It's almost like a review, right? If a restaurant has a bad review, then, you're also going to consider it twice. But my question then is, we obsess about it from a consumer experience perspective. Even the payment link, it has to get done in less than 10 seconds. Otherwise, the person's going to, drop off. There's so much kind of thought process put into the consumer experience, right? Where do you think we've kind of maybe dropped off from an EX perspective? I know the last 12 months, like Ashish was saying earlier, there's been a huge focus on digital transformation in the HR space. But do you think we're at that stage right now where, it could be something that we start obsessing about in that minutiae of detail in terms of, if payment doesn't go through in 10 seconds, then it's going to be a terrible experience. Similarly, if, my experience with, onboarding, offboarding, transitions, whatever it may be, performance, are we at that stage today, to learn from that CX perspective?
I would agree. I think we are in that stage. I think, it actually is an evolution, Kiran. I think the way I see it is, from a mindset point of view, I think we have always, there is this research that EX drives CX, and companies which actually do EX actually perform really well in the profit, the top 500 companies and all of that. So there is a lot of research that has been doing this, and this goes back to almost 25 years of research, right? And then what has still stopped us? It's not like anything has actually stopped us. The transformation has been that work was actually happening in a different context earlier, and our practices were actually tuned towards that. We had mastered the art of, let's say, in-person working. Classroom sessions were actually happening, learnings were actually happening, and for that world, employee experience was something that we actually figured out, and we actually figured out how to actually make things happen in that context. And suddenly here comes the age of digital era, and I think probably you agree that even the businesses have actually started getting transformed probably since the .com boom, and probably in India specifically, since let's say the Flipkarts of the world have actually started revolutionizing the way in which business actually happens, and from there a lot of us have actually changed the way in which convenience has actually transformed, right?
Yep.
So from that lens, now the question is businesses have actually taken the leap of faith. Now we are actually now moving the place of work from an offline world to an online world, which also means that a lot of unlearning has to happen from a mindset point of view, which is earlier we saw employee preferences from a different lens. Today there's actually a different lens. So a lot of us mindset, the toolkits that we actually carried, and also the tech that actually enables and drives that actually needs to change. A small example is what we measured as employee experience in probably maybe 10 years before versus what we measure right now is actually very different. So that is actually where it is. But I think there is a huge acknowledgement of this change, and there is actually obviously a lot of demand, because when employees are actually seeing what a consumer grade experience means, they will actually obviously demand. And with the talent crunch that's there in the market, it's only right that hey, the best experience provider means.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can say talent crunch again. I think all of us will kind of agree to that. But yeah, so thanks for that, Ram. Sana, from your perspective, I think within an organization, when an employee joins, when an employee kind of continues their journey through the life cycle, there is a huge amount of data that's being collected about the individual, right? There's demographic data, there's work experience, educational experience, family, everything, whatever's needed for compliance, whatever's needed for growth, skills. In your opinion, how can we really put that data to use from a employee experience perspective in order to deliver a much better experience? What could be some of those, opportunities, challenges, hurdles that you might see?
I think that's a good question. I think somewhere I feel we've moved beyond that, to be honest. Like all of that data is going to be very pertinent, and maybe not even all of it, right? Like at one point of time, it was important to know exactly who you were and where you came from. Now it's more important to understand who you are and what you bring to the table, and how can we enable you on this journey of creating value and creating impact in the organization that you belong to. So I think from that lens, it's going to be a lot more pertinent to understand what are you feeling now. Are you experiencing what we want you to experience? What is it that is working out for you? What is it that is not working out for you, right? So all the experiences, for example, that we spoke about, whether it is onboarding, whether it is performance, whether it is engagement, that's a lot of data collection that we are doing. And that is more about these moments that matter to me, right? Irrespective of whether you came from the south of India or the north of India or the US or the Europe or wherever, right? Those demographics would matter, because I want to make sure that I am doing everything that matters to you for wherever you are based out of. But it does not contribute in any other way. It is important critical data for you when you design, but it is not really data that will help you improve upon it or create the right metrics, right? Like, so I think it is very important to understand that slight distinction. And of course, compliances matter, right? Like data with responsibility, like you mentioned, very important. And apart from that experience, I think then there's the other thing that you want employers to do, which is essentially there's certain elements as an organization that we want employees to experience. Yes, it is while you on board. Yes, it is while while we do your performance and help you through your growth. But I think what matters now to Gen Z is going to be very different. We are all talking about very meta metrics. We are talking about, do you have trust in this organization? Do you feel we are transparent? Do you think we focus on the right CSR initiatives, right? Like, because these are all the things that really matter now to the employees. And exactly how Ram and you were speaking about the war for talent. And I think these are the right metrics where basically the point I'm coming from, all those demographics then don't matter so much, when you are designing your experiences and those moments.
Got it. No, actually, I want to allude to that a little bit more, is that working with multiple companies, one of the things that we've kind of seen a lot is understanding from a data perspective that the Gen Z today, when they're joining, they're very interested in knowing how the company is a sustainable and responsible citizen from a society perspective, right? And that's data that potentially should be used to kind of improve that experience and deliver what they're expecting. So Ram, any thoughts or any examples from your perspective on how skills data, you were talking about feedback a lot, and maybe contextual feedback, moment-based feedback. How do you use that sort of data to deliver a better experience?
Yeah, sure, Kiran. I think I'll probably speak about the journey that we are on. Still early stages. I think that's where we are. I think the first thing is identifying what you need to measure and actually having a bit of science behind why you need to measure them, right? I think fundamentally it starts with being able to craft your employee lifecycle management, like your consumer lifecycle management. And all of this starts with speaking to the employees first. And you have to actually go back and empathize with your employees, speak to them, understand what personas really exist, what personas actually are the differentiators from them. So this comes from a lot of listening. So the first thing that you have to do is actually listen on the ground, put in place technology that actually help you to sense what's actually happening on the ground. At the same time, deploy your HR business partners, tap into channels, leaders coming together to actually formulate, hey, you know what, here are our employee needs and here's what our actually employees saying. And this becomes the fundamental base on which you can actually craft any experience for that matter, because the fundamental thing about experience is your emotion. I need to actually know how you're actually feeling for me to be able to react to how you're actually feeling and probably speak around that. So the first thing that we did was actually put in place listening tools and listening mechanisms. Still a lot of progress has to be done, but that's a good place to start with, because unless and until you have a bare minimum understanding of what employees are actually experiencing now, and the reason I'm saying this now is that a lot many times feedback is stale, and by the time you're actually acting, there is a lot of externalities that have already come into the picture, and employees, the mood has actually changed in the organization. So you need to have a mechanism via which you're actually always measuring, or at least know how it is today versus how it was earlier, etc. Starts with that, and then once you formulate that, then breaking it into 3 layers. One layer is I think again there are certain short-term levers that you can actually always deploy to be able to drive employee experience, and a lot of employee experience also comes from a lot of long-term levers being done very, very consistently over a period of time. And so clearly identifying your short-term levers, ensuring that you actually put your entire army behind actually chasing and actually posting on the short-term levers, because they are going to give you the key wins. Small things like, for example, a day one experience doesn't really require a lot of automation, etc., to come together. Day one experience, you don't need magic. It's actually in your hands, and you can actually fix it probably in about a week's time. But if you were to actually go back and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to actually get into personalizing the 90-day journey of an employee, and go back and say, hey, you know what, here is how the first 90 days of a product manager is going to look like. Here is how the first 90 days of an engineer is going to look like. That's actually a long-term part. You have to actually put in place processes. You need to know that, you know what, my first 5 days are going to be like this. Maybe they are the place where it's actually overlapping. There are measurement points across. But then after which, this persona branches off, and they actually have a slightly different experience. There are knowledge touch points, artifacts to be generated, probably actually engineering interactions between multiple people, etc., etc. And these are slightly more long-term, taking chewable points and actually ensuring that they're able to bite the bullet, and actually ensuring that it is continuously delivering and actually eating into this 90 days. I'll actually say that start with day 1, take it to day 5, and then probably move to day 30, take it to day 90. And in these pockets, there are certain levers which actually come in the first 3 months, certain levers actually come in the first 12 months. That is how we have been actually going about it. So largely, the approach has been that listen, design processes that will actually deliver in the short term, because you need to deliver short term wins. There's no two ways about it. The third one is, hey, as you're actually delivering, and there is actually a segment of your team which is actually delivering the short term wins, clearly have a long-term process in place, and actually try to put in place this process, see where what are the leakage points. Then probably get into automation and actually measurement of the analytics part of it. Right? That's how it is. But when I say the measurement of the analytics, that's more transaction measurement. You still need to have your listening tools upfront for you to do anything. Yeah.
Got it. No, that really helps. Thanks, Ram. I think just as a follow-up to that, do you think that if you're thinking about revamping the experience using data points like this, are there more foundational layers you need to kind of put in place initially? I mean, is it like, I'm sure all of us in our organizations are seeing that we're now using more and more apps. There are more and more kind of systems in place. There are more and more kind of, UIs that the employee has to learn and touch, from a touch point perspective. So in order to get prepped for what you were saying, Ram, do you think that there are certain kind of, milestones that the organization needs to kind of get to from an infrastructure perspective, or even from a organization and HR organization perspective as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you need to actually, so probably delivering a exemplary employee experience is still a 6 months goal in my mind. Like, for example, you can actually take an organization and say that, hey, let me actually completely revamp the employee experience, and you can still achieve this milestone in 6 months. Where it actually takes time is actually the consistency and the predictability part of it. You need to actually deliver it consistently and ensuring that each and every interaction remains the same as where the real work is, right? So if you actually have the right people in the room, and if you're actually able to imagine the processes, and if you genuinely have this employee centricity where you're actually, and when I say employee centricity, it's not just about going and talking to employees. Many times I feel like, we miss the trick of not code designing or probably co-crafting this process about the employees. A lot of these people are actually defining processes for like millions of users out there. Just get them on board and actually ask them to craft your own processes, and probably like take a leaf from their book, right? That's the simplest hack that you could actually do. And have your own employee resource concepts to be able to put in place this process. Once you have done that, then what you need to actually be clear about is, I think, fundamentally our HR organization, sometimes the way in which we are organized is actually a slight bit of an anti to the way in which we actually deliver employee experience, because we are very, very functional, like we are organized functionally. Like there's actually a deep textbooks, reflection, etc., right? And suddenly you look at an employee life cycle or an employee experience, you realize that, hey, it's a horizontal. You actually realize that there are multiple people who have come together to actually be able to try this experience. So somewhere you also have to identify what suits your company culture, your ways of working, and really put in place the engine that will actually give you a process that will not break. The first thing is, you should be able to design a process that doesn't break, at least on paper, and be able to repeat that, whatever, right? A lot many times what happens is, I look at some other company, hey, that process looks great, I take it up and I actually put in here, it's going to break because your context, your culture is very different. So you have to take that perspective. And once you have done that, what really is necessary is actually investing in a good HR tech team. It's important that you do believe, at least you should actually have the mindset of delivering a consumer grade employee experience, right? And at least you should have a vision for what does this consumer grade employee experience look like. Reaching the destination is going to take some time. I'm just going to put the disclaimer out there, and I probably it's not like everyone has actually mastered the consumer grade employee experience, but you should actually have the vision. Nothing is stopping us from having the vision. Second one is, once you have this vision, then you should actually also get into, hey, how do you actually make these pieces of the puzzle come alive? And again, maybe it's some of my thought processes. A lot many times, the tools in the market, there are enterprise grade tools that I've seen at play. But there are beautiful tools that are actually coming out there, which are actually solving for this, mini milestones really, really well. Right. And a lot many times what happens is, because we want convenience in the way in which we operate HR, sometimes the enterprise grade tools are easy because you bring them in, put them in place. It actually fits you one. I mean, it's essentially hey, one shoe, it doesn't really fit all, but then you try to actually perspective that it doesn't really work that way. Sure. So what also requires is that you actually need to imagine your high level architecture of systems in such a way where you should know which system to actually bring in first, which means you should know how to play around with your APIs, connector systems together. So again, all of that starts from have your process first, understand what is consumer grade experience. That's the second milestone. Once you have put in place, choose systems backward from that vision. Not actually, a lot many times we bring in a tool and then we go back and say, around this, what can be done? And that's never going to really, really work. You have to actually go back and think about your vision first and come bring in your tools. And that's a frustrating journey, to be very honest. It's not going to be a journey that's going to happen 6 months or 1 year, but you have to bite the bullet, you have to take that one. Sure. And equally important is knowing where to instrument. Like as you rightly said, employee experience in the digital world is actually about capturing those data points. A lot many times, we go back and implement systems, and then we go back and say data Nayyar. hey, why is data not coming in? Because you didn't instrument. There's no API, there's no connections really happening. So you're having that mindset to be able to say that, hey, experience, data points for those experience, how are they actually going to flow in? How are you going to measure them? And a lot of this actually, I believe, comes from the fact that, probably easily hackable by actually getting a lot more of business folks partnering with you to be able to design it. Because I genuinely feel like, the consumer experience is actually a solved problem. Of course, there is actually a lot more journey to be done. But I think within organizations, we have experts who have already done it for a bigger cohort. Just getting them and partnering with them probably is an easy hack. And that's where it starts.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Ram. That makes a lot of sense. I think, Sana, in continuation to this, and I think there are a few questions on the chat as well, which is, there is also this culture and change management that'll kind of come in, right, from a technology perspective. So I think, a couple of questions around that. If you're looking to build these unified solutions, which, have a user centricity to it, does the HR manager of today need to almost understand technology and architecture and those kind of things, to Ram's point as well? You need to know where you want to go and then work backwards to see what fits into that picture. So have you started seeing the need to be a little bit more, I would say, coding, engineering, architecture savvy, just so that you understand where all this data is and how it can be kind of plugged together?
Okay, so first I would probably definitely plus one what Ram said, right? Like I don't really buy into the whole enterprise grade, and I feel that you can do enough and more with not only niche tools, but even the most simplest of polls that you are running on your internal communication tools, whatever they might be, or just go back to Google Forms or Teams or whatever you're using.
Yeah.
Right? So that also does the trick of collecting data for you. My personal opinion, you need someone, if you're thinking in a large organization or even the organizations of our size, who can help you through the journey of integrating these multiple platforms, helping you get the data together. But if it was a layman HR person, I think more than anything else, you need to understand how you're going to be able to design it, right? Like, so something as simple as putting your employee experience, you're designing your employee experiences, and then you're identifying in each of those moments, what are those moments that matter. Then in each of those moments, what are those important metrics or important pieces that you want to really measure. And I think that requires a lot more design element, where I don't understand APIs and architecture, but I think what I would probably understand is how do I want to make sure that my moments are captured, I'm measuring the right things, I am also able to derive insights. I think that's a more critical job for the HR person. You do have obviously specialists in HR tech, and that's the job that they have, is to bring all these multiple pieces together and try and create as beautiful a centralized system as possible. But for the HR business partners or the HR managers out there, I think it's more critical for them to understand how am I able to use all this information that is coming to me, and then go back and design and reiterate and make it better. They have their own individual viewpoints. They talk to employees, they talk to business leaders, they're looking at the data. So that's the more critical job that I feel we have to play.
Got it. No, makes sense. And actually, I'll kind of follow up with you again. I think there are a couple of kind of chats and questions coming on chat as well. I think Rakesh mentioned that EX should connect all the things that really matter. People to purpose to profit. I think keeping that in mind, I have seen one of the biggest challenges most HR organizations have is not necessarily to collect the data, but it is to visualize and understand all that, barrage of data that's coming in. What is the feedback? Then, which level is this person at? What's the career journey? So there's just so much going on, right? From an HR perspective as well, to try and monitor and manage from a data perspective. So do you have any thoughts on what are some of the challenges or best practices to kind of manage that?
I think that's a great point, and I think this is actually where I envision technology to be able to help me, which is kind of bring all these things together for me and tell me that hey, if somebody is joining me at a particular time of the year from a particular cohort, how are their experiences panning out? Is it different? Is it the same? How is the performance being panned out? Who is the reporting manager and where does it? Are they able to develop the skills? So you'll have different technology who's taking people through these various experiences. Then you might have something else altogether which is measuring these various experiences for the employee. But you're absolutely right, there's a lot of data out there, and I feel this is again great people analytics folks out there, and burgeoning field where the ability to bring all this data together and cascade it down and to bring insights to the table is very critical. And I think that's where technology honestly has a huge role to play.
Got it. No, absolutely. Ram, anything from your perspective on this? The whole unification of a data angle.
Hey, unification of data. I think it's actually a journey that we are actually implementing at Swiggy right now. Pretty interesting journey. A lot of what I would say, it's an 18-month or 24-month journey. As frustrating as it will be, because sometimes I feel like hey, any person working in HR, when they're actually setting up a data mart and actually trying to power up a Power BI is going to probably feel like hey, I'm just done with this. So the reason is, I think largely it boils down to three things. One is the easiest one, or the puzzle to crack, is knowing what to measure. I think that's slightly more easy in the puzzle. It's because you go back and ask your business leaders, you go back and ask your CHRO, you go back and ask your peers, hey, what data points would you like to have, or what metrics would you like to have to better take this decision where we're going to be able to easily articulate. So I feel like that's actually the most easiest piece of the puzzle. So which means your North Star is actually very easy. Right? And which means where you want to get to is actually almost like it's the most easiest piece of the puzzle. Where it actually getting a little tricky is that first things first is the more decentralized your system architecture is, as many number of systems for you to make them talk to each other, data governance rules, having the need for ensuring that hey, there's first data consistency, the system needs to talk together. Second one is there needs to be a process which actually ensures that the data becomes stable and all of that. That is actually where it becomes tricky, because discipline is actually a very hard thing. And sometimes just ensuring that again, when we speak about consistency for the end user, that also is we need to speak about consistency on what it actually goes in to be able to power that part, right? And that's where it actually gets tricky. I think the reason why I said the most difficult part is that I think a lot of the tools that we have in the market are also evolving. I think over the last I would say 1 year of this entire data mart journey, I've spent enough time actually speaking to enough HR tech providers, convincing them to say that, hey, please expose me your APIs because I need to pull data. And so there's actually a HR tech evolution to be done. That's one side of the story. The second side of the story is that hey, once you're able to pull all of this data up, you need to actually power on three parallel things. One is imagine there's actually a data platform person actually working, modeling, and getting all these things together. That person is actually providing a black box. So what goes in, if it's garbage, it's going to come out as a garbage. And which means that you need to actually have processes. So many times, you can't actually skip database decision making, or you can actually leapfrog into a future where you want to actually drive everything with data, unless and until you are actually able to drive and process it. So that's the process world is actually literally what drives it. I think that's where the real difficulty is. I think the technology part of it is probably, I would also say that it's becoming much more easier. Visualization is probably the least of the problems.
Okay, got it. Makes sense. No, absolutely. I think the follow-up would also be is to everyone who's here, what would be that maturity level that you need from a tech and infra perspective in order to even start on this journey?
In fact, it might be useful to ask our audiences what challenges, because I saw a couple of questions, particularly for Ram, to say, hey, how do you track your employee data? And then Ram comes up with this, data centricity, security, and the consistency and the quality of the data, and the rigor and the discipline required. I think that's another. So might be interesting to let's have the second opinion poll around what does the audience, because I've got a lot of comments. So I'm just bringing up another question for the audience around some of the challenges that you see to get this data correct. So just let me bring up the second poll. For all our audiences who've been asking us questions, here it is coming on your screens. You should be able to see what are the biggest hurdles or challenges when it comes to designing a good employee experience. You have, oh great, maturity of technology, first one. I'm sure, others, what do you think about it? Okay, I'm getting a couple of more responses. Request everybody. Okay, now we're getting more people taking it up. Okay. Wow. Reporting and dashboards till now have not been a challenge. So, wow. We're just going to keep it like open for another 10 seconds, and then maybe I can ask all the SMEs and all our expert panels to talk through what does it come. It's coming across as a very, very mixed opinion. Maybe the last 5 seconds of the poll. Okay, let me end the poll, and I'm just sharing the results on the screen. So what you will see is, almost about audience being kind of almost equally about to say access to good and integrated data. That has always been a challenge. Maturity of technology, yes, that's what Ram talked about. Aligning managers across HR departments, IT, admin, etc. I think that's yes. As HR, we sometimes don't really understand the IT part of it, so which is another. How do you look at it from your perspective, Kiran? What is, I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, but what does this mean? What does, just interpret the data for us?
Yeah, so I think at least from our experience, working with multiple companies globally, I think one of the key kind of concerns when companies start thinking about revamping the EX is that very often it starts with just that statement. I want to revamp our EX. I want it to be better, right? And unfortunately, that does not add any sort of clarity for anyone within the organization or from a partner perspective. I think then when you start kind of focusing on, the nitty-gritties and you start getting into details, you start realizing that to clean up or to deliver a good EX, you need to clean up your house first, right? And otherwise it's almost impossible because you're just going to keep, like Ram said, garbage in, garbage out, right? And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And I'm assuming when people are saying maturity of technology, that's fundamentally the problem. You can't really deliver a good EX if half of your HR team is sitting and downloading reports on Excel and trying to collate 5 of them together to see what is happening from an experience perspective, right? So I think that starts becoming the first kind of hurdle, is to try and see how you could consolidate and clean up your house, so-called, from a technology perspective. I don't know.
And that's so interesting. What I've always wondered, and probably a Sana can answer us that question. So when it comes to say customer data, and Urban Clap does it so well. Like genuinely, I'm saying this. I'm so surprised by the app telling me, this is time to get your ACs, repaired again or serviced again. It's been 2 months. You've not had a haircut. Why does HR not? Why doesn't HR get to that level? When it comes to creating an experience, why do we miss that? And somebody on the chat, I think Leena, Rakesh, and others, Pooja, who talked about culture. Is it like a lack of culture within us, or is there something, or is it a mindset issue that we have? Would want to hear from Sana, Ram.
Very politically charged question, Ashish. Because you'll get that answer from me. So honestly, I believe it's because HR needs to be treated, this issue needs to be treated like a business problem. You'll get your answers if it gets treated like a business problem at the end of the day, right? I'm not saying that it's going to get that kind of investment, or at least it'll get you the interest, the inputs, the push for making and getting this right across the organization, not just from a 20-member team or a 50-member team, which is your HR team, versus as big as your organization is or as big as your leadership team is, right? Every people manager is responsible for employee experiences. What is employee experience? Let's say I'm talking about giving Kiran growth in urban company, right? That's not going to be dependent on how HR is designing it. It's not only dependent on how HR is measuring, but it's actually to the last man, the man who's managing or the woman who's managing Kiran, to be able to deliver that experience to him. So I actually genuinely feel that it's not an HR problem. It has to be treated like a business problem, and that's when you will start getting the change and the culture change that comes with it. To get that kind of eyeballs on this particular issue.
Fantastic. It's no more an HR problem. I completely agree. Completely agree. Pooja on the chat says the same. Ram, your thoughts, and then I'm going to turn to Kiran, because he really has to challenge, like, does he need to talk to HR? Does he need to really now talk to the CEO of an organization?
Hey, cool. I think, I'll probably take the accountability on HR actually a lot for sure. So sorry, sir, I'm just going to deviate a little bit here. So the thing is, I think the business is asking. I think folks are asking, as Kiran mentioned, our employees are actually Gen Z folks. They are asking. Many of it is actually on us. It needs a vision, sponsorship, resources to be able to drive that. I think it's a lot of it is also about just being able to, imagine this and be able to break it down and serve it in forms that is more palatable, right? Like, for example, as Kiran mentioned, hey, I want my employee experience to be better. Yeah, of course, everybody wants to be better, but better how is actually the question. And better how actually has a gradient. You can actually go from 0 to 100 in one day. It's actually a journey. So the example that you mentioned, right? The recommendations, the beauty of the consumer grade experiences are actually coming from years of thoughts and years of investment being done in a very consistent manner to be able to deliver. And what that also requires is that now we should be able to adopt the MVP mindset that business does, right? Hey, you want to actually deploy something, go back, do some small MVPs, get some data, and actually figure out, go back and show that hey, this actually worked. Now give me more resources that can actually deploy and all of that. So I think a little bit of that, probably the internal source searching, and from there probably being able to. And the next one is, it's also about catching the tiger's tail. Once you actually catch the tiger's tail, you should be able to deliver on it. So I think once you actually get the mandate, the CEO will come back and say, hey, go deliver that. You should be able to take it up and should be able to deliver that. So I think the beauty of this is I genuinely feel like over the last 2-3 years, I think we have actually made great, tremendous strides in this journey. But it's not actually a short-term journey. That's pretty much what I've actually stressed on. Right? It's not actually like, hey, we thought about it and probably that's why I said in 6 months you can still provide some peak experiences, but employee experience is actually about consistency and repeatability. That takes time. So that will take a lot more of time and fitness and repeated execution, and that's what's going to happen.
Great. Now, here's something that, okay, so I heard a Sana who said, business has to take it up. I heard Ram who kind of, tried to keep it safe and said, okay, we hold it by the horns and, there's going to be some time. Okay, let me turn to a Kiran. And I'm sure, Kiran, you would be very honest with us. Where does the buck stop? Is it the CEO of the organization? When I say a CEO, it could be any business leader as well. Is it the, is it the business leader or is it the CHRO? Whom should be where does the accountability lie? Who should I hold accountable for this, the EX?
Sure. So I'll actually narrate it maybe with an example, right? And also trying to actually break it down. So if you think about just the onboarding journey to start with, what we realized fairly quickly is, only about 35-40% of all tasks or responsibilities from an onboarding perspective is actually HR. 40% of the tasks are IT, then there's, the financial teams, there's the admin teams, there's the operations. So going back to what Sana was saying, it's not just HR, right? And unfortunately, everyone thinks that EX, if it's broken, means, HR has to fix it. But it's impossible to do. What I am starting to see though more and more is that with at least the companies that are, actually taking that leap and probably way ahead from a maturity perspective, is that most of our projects and most of our deployments is a partnership between the CHRO and the CIO or the CTO. And so it kind of goes in as not just an HR problem, but it goes in as a larger, business technology problem. And where you're starting to take away those nomenclatures of, hey, this is an HR problem, let HR fix it, right? And so I think, digital transformation is a bashed up word, but I think that's where it starts coming alive, is when you actually have multiple, departments partnering to make sure something goes through. Because at the end of the day, none of this is individual. If it's about CX, and you wanted to kind of have a much better consumer experience, if something's not working, the CIO, the CTO is going to be in as much of trouble as is the head of sales or head of marketing, right? So I think it's the same kind of thought process that needs to start coming in, and we've started seeing it with certain organizations, but I think that's going to keep increasing more and more.
Interesting, very interesting, because and believe me, this is like one insight that I'm taking away, at least me, and I would want the audience to tell us on the chat, because having heard this, I would have actually reworded the last question that I wanted to ask all of us. Hey, where does at what stage can data be used most effectively? Like where, at recruitment or onboarding, and you talked about how HR and IT or maybe other functions need to come together. So had I heard this before what you just said, maybe I would have wanted to kind of bring in some business elements. But with that, let us launch, and let's go at the third opinion poll and look at what do the the larger audience think about. So I'm just bringing this up on the screen for all of you. You would see, okay, so at which stage can data be most effectively used to enhance the employee experience? I know there are all HR linkage options out there. I would want all of our audience to kind of give us their opinion. But yeah, having heard Sana and Kiran now, maybe I would have wanted to add another element. Okay, engagement. Some people saying that's easy. Wow. Okay, great. I'm starting to get responses. We have just got 5 minutes more to go for the session. So I would want, let's take this poll a little bit quicker than the others. Request everybody else, please, can you give us your opinion? Wow. There is a good, tilt towards the onboarding, but yes, and there's this very funny thing that has come up. I'm going to just share it in another 5 seconds once this poll gets over. So maybe it's time, maybe last 5 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, maybe. Okay, so let's look at the results. Thanks everybody who has taken the poll. Here, I'm just sharing on the screen. Nothing on pre-hiring and recruitment, and nothing on exit management, right? And I would want all my 3 panelists to please talk about that. And how do you interpret? So maybe this time around, Ram, would you want to take this first?
Yeah, I'll probably just react to the poll. I would say that no folks listen to the exiting employees a lot more. They have a lot of insights to say. So if at all, I'm going to say that no, start listening with your exiting employees. But I think it's a question of maturity, Ashish. I would say it's not actually a question of where data can be applicable. It's more a question of as Sana mentioned, there are moments that matter to an employee. There are moments that matter at different stages of an employee life cycle. So I think when an employee is joining in, you might actually have brilliant performance systems, but what matters is the first 90 days, and that's really what matters, right? So some of these data points are actually more around hey, data is actually very, very important across the entire life cycle. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's more actually follow your digital transformation, what I would say, journey. Whatever is automated is actually where you'll actually have the data, and hence, that's what you'll be able to crunch and derive insights at the end of the day. So that's the simple answer. I wouldn't actually discount that my data isn't actually valuable in any other district.
I think you're on mute, Ashish.
I'm so sorry, yeah. So maybe let's move on to Sana.
Okay, so this is very difficult. It's like Sophie's choice for me. I don't know if I can pick any one and say, hey, this is the most critical. I think every moment has something else to do, and a different input to give to your business folks and to your HR people. And I think I definitely do want to say that I won't confuse the technology with the experience at all. So these are all moments where, we all need to hear what people have to say, and they have inputs for different aspects of your experience. So for me, it's Sophie's choice. I don't think I'll be able to choose at all. I won't even say, "Ki hey, kuch karna hai to ye karo."
Right.
I would just say, "Ki you need to go out there and talk to your people who are at different stages at different points, because nobody is going to say, "Ki okay, don't do exit management, only do onboarding as HR."
Right.
Right? Nobody's going to tell you that. So for me,
No,
you
I like
have
what
to
you
go
said
out
earlier
there.
also. I like what you said earlier also, and I think that's another insight that I'm going to take away from the session today. Mass customization. This is a time when every one of us, wants the same thing in a very different, specific terms, and that's what the world has come to. So, if that is what it is, yeah, mass customization I think is the key. That's the message that I'm giving. Over to Kiran. How do you look at it from an SME perspective? You're the expert here. Tell us.
No, I the way I'm interpreting it is, when companies think about transforming EX and I want to change EX, it's impossible for them for all of us to kind of look at the entire thing and say, let's go after the entire life cycle on day one. And so the way I'm interpreting the poll responses is perhaps this is based on each individual and where they are at from a maturity perspective within the organization that they are in, right? So maybe they need to get their onboarding fixed. They need to get their, performance management fixed. And that's kind of like top of mind for them right now. I don't think it can be a choice like Sana was mentioning, but I think when you ask this question and you give it as a single choice, it just becomes almost impossible for you not to think of the first thing that's in your head from a pain point perspective, right? So I think it's just that where companies are and where each individual is from the thought process of what they want to impact initially. And I think that's a good way to think about it, because again, you cannot do everything on day one. You cannot, as Ram has said it a few times, it's a long journey, good time period to kind of think of is 6 months, and what can you do in those 6 months. Anything beyond that is, a little overwhelming, I think, for most. So that's how I would basically interpret it.
And it's so surprising that in 2021 we're talking about like a transformation like this in 6 months. Imagine 2 years back when technology was not so. 6 months would have been we would have been shot down. 6 months is too less a time. But I think that's what technology and what the transformational world has done to us. I'm going to take 1 minute comment from each one of you, starting from Sana, to say your parting words on the employee experience. One thing that you would want to tell our audience before we end this session with today.
Okay, I would just repeat myself and say it's very critical. I think you have to work well at what Ram said, which is listen, talk to your business and work with them. And based on all the questions I've heard so far, don't confuse experience with technology. So your experience can be delivered irrespective of the technology that you use. So yeah.
Thank you so much. That's very powerful. Maybe I'll go to Kiran next.
So I think, from a parting words perspective, I think one of the things that I would say is that I would echo what Sana is saying. Very often when we start deploying across companies, there is this notion that if you bring in technology, you can do less and you can be a lot less human. Even human interactions reduce. But actually what I always try and say is that if that technology does not enable you to have a much more contextual conversation, then maybe you need to reconsider that, right? So it's not just about coming and eliminating that human interaction, but whatever you're doing from a data perspective, from a technology perspective, it has to improve that human relationship that you want to build within the organization. And that should kind of be the dipstick almost before you kind of start launching yourself into projects.
That's a very powerful one, because technology is just an enabler, not a replacer. So I think that's a very powerful one, because trust me, I do meet people who tell us that, when we talk about an employee experience, so their focus is towards how the technology was brought in. Maybe time to look beyond those elements.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ram, any?
Yeah, I think the panelists have actually covered it up and summed it up really well. I think the market is super hot today. What's really going to differentiate is the experience that people have and what they hear from people who have actually been working in this company. It's a true differentiator. Again, to articulate and re-articulate this, experience is multiplied, scaled, and repeated by technology, but experience is not imagined by technology. Technology is just a repeater at the end of the day. So you have to actually figure out your own vision. And I think, start with the employee and end with the employee. That's the party needs.
Thank you so much, Ram. Thanks a ton to the audience, who kept it alive, brought your questions, brought your insights. Thanks a ton. Personal thanks to Ram and Sana, for coming out, taking out time, and a big amount of thank you to Tydy, the whole Tydy team, which has been helping us at the back end, and to you specifically, to you, from our perspective, from SHRM's perspective, from my own perspective. Thanks a ton for helping us to put this together. Wish you all the very best, and as we keep our conversations going on around and we learn together. So all of you have a very fantastic day ahead and a nice weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, Ram. Thanks, Sana. Thanks, Ashish.
Hey, thank you so much. Totally enjoyed the conversation, Ashish, Sana.
Yeah.
Kiran. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.